Good afternoon everyone, it's Anthony here at Tweaktown, and today I thought I'd do a video on the PlayStation 4 Pro. Over the last couple of days we've had a flood of news about how Sony has released their, well not released, but they've talked about their PlayStation 4 Pro console. That was the codename Neo console from pretty much the last year or so that we've been hearing rumors. It's an upgraded console from Sony that is much faster than the PlayStation 4 Pro. It's meant to be a mid-cycle refresh of the PlayStation 4. It has faster internals, a faster CPU or a higher clock CPU, a higher clocked GPU with improved GCN cores. It has the same 8 GB of GDDR5 memory and a bunch of other little changes that Sony have done. But it was an article that caught my eye yesterday from Sony's, one of Sony's bosses, one of the CEOs, Andrew House. And he said that they didn't want they didn't want gamers to be going off to the PC for 4K gaming or high-end gaming because they wanted to capture everyone with the new PlayStation 4 Pro, and they think that this is going to be the console that's actually going to stop people from upgrading to a PC. So I wrote the article, which I'm just pulling up now, and it was pretty crazy to hear Sony, not hear Sony say that, but to see Sony say that, knowing that the PC can never be compared to a console unless consoles have a massive leap in terms of specifications and the openness of the console compared to the openness of the PC. It will never be the same. The upgradability of the PC will never be the same as a console. It's just, it can't be compared. And Sony somehow thinks that they can compare their PlayStation 4 Pro, which is just a slightly upgraded PlayStation 4, which was not even a great console to start with and still is not going to be a great console. It's not going to be doing 4K 30 gaming like everyone thinks it will be doing, because it's not going to be a leap in graphics. Every time we've had an upgraded console, there's been a leap in graphics. There's been an upgrade. There's been it usually is a leap. There's always an upgrade in graphics where every game looks better, every experience is better, but we seem to have stopped that. It's really bad to see Sony being like this. They had an opportunity to really hurt Microsoft, not just the Xbox One, but the Xbox One S and then Xbox Scorpio. I really don't see how Sony are going to survive this, and they probably will. I can say they won't survive, but I know that they will because they're a massive company. But PlayStation is their most profitable division, and they really need to be nailing this into the future. And they seem to have just made their 100% focus is 4K. It's almost like just hearing the words 4K is meant to just generate money. It just gets thrown at Sony's bank accounts. But the PC will always be there. Consoles have changed, it's not like we get PC 1 and PC 2 and then PC 5 and PC 4 Pro. We have varying levels of PC. You can buy a shitty gaming laptop for $500 and still have an amazing gaming experience. You don't need to be at 4K to be having a great gaming experience. I have 4K monitors all around me, ultra wides behind the camera. I have a bunch of monitors everywhere, and I don't like 4K gaming. I think 4K gaming, you need too much hardware to get there, and the graphics are not that much better. Sure, the resolution is better. It's sharper, it looks better, but the textures aren't 4K. The animations don't look that great because they're built for substandard consoles, which suck. We're talking about 720p graphics in a console that sold for $400. I don't get it. Sony have pretty much said that before the PlayStation 4 Pro that the new PlayStation was going to be the big thing. It's going to be huge, and that it's going to last for the next 10 years. And then they quickly realized that the severely underpowered APU inside of the PlayStation 4 wasn't enough, and gamers were getting sick of it. Obviously, developers were hitting a massive brick wall because they didn't have enough power inside of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. I can't leave the Xbox One out of this, but this is more a Sony discussion at least for the beginning. Sony think that it's okay to say that the PlayStation 4 was good at the time because if they came out and said, look, it's 2013 and we're releasing the PlayStation 4 and it's going to last for 10 years, but You don't think that they would have had plans to have released a PlayStation 4 Pro with these kinds of specs at this time? You know, they would have had those plans. It's not like they just decided a year ago to do this. There's so much marketing and manufacturing, and you have to go to AMD or NVIDIA. Obviously, this is an AMD chip. They've got an AMD. This is what we're going to need. You know, how far are you away from fabrication of the 14nm node? This is kind of like what we can do, and then AMD have to go back. You know, this is what we can do for you guys. Here's some, you know, prototypes. It would have been planned for pretty much probably from the inception of the PlayStation 4 or before. So Sony knew that the PS4 was underpowered. They absolutely knew. For them to come out and say that they didn't, or to come out and say that they didn't need it and this console generation was going to last longer, it's just bullshit. They're coming out and trying to be the cool guys now. You know, we've got a new console, it's going to be awesome. And sure it is. If you compare spec for spec, it is better. But it's not a leap. It's not a pro version of the console. To me, a pro version should have been $399 for the current PlayStation 4, maybe drop that down to $299 or $349, and then bump the PS4 Pro to $699, and then call that the PS4, I don't know, Pro, and then have PS4 Neo at like $1,000. For any of you that read my article yesterday, I said that I think that Sony should have charged a lot more. I think that Sony, this was their chance, and personally, I think that this was their only chance before the PlayStation 5, if that even arrives, to really make a difference. The PlayStation 5 will probably not be announced or even released until at least 2019. People will think that's going to happen earlier, right? It's been 3 years with the PlayStation 4 and we're still here. PlayStation 4 Pro's here now and we're barely getting up to 4K. They're using 4K as this new buzzword and this new selling point. And it's like, well, you promised 1080p with the last generation and you barely hit 900p. Most games are 720p up to about 900p. I'd rather them come out and say, this is a true 1080p console at 60 FPS. And just now 1080p 60 FPS, that's it. If gamers want a 4K console, see what the reception's like. And then release another console, which is 4K. You can't just release one console that does it all. That's what a PC's for. If you want to be able to do it all, you want to be able to play Overwatch at 4K, you'll buy a certain graphics card. You want to play Battlefield 1 at 4K, you need to buy a certain graphics card. But Sony want to sell you a one solution that can just do it all. That waters down the entire gaming market. I don't really see how Sony think that this is okay. And then you've got Microsoft diving into the situation going, okay, well, we've got Xbox Scorpio, which is even faster, and this is going to be a 4K machine. So then Microsoft's going to have the same problem. For them to brag that their console is close to 50% faster than the PS4 Pro, which it is, it's over 6 teraflops of compute performance versus the 4.2 teraflops of the PS4 Pro, then I expect Xbox Scorpio to do 4K 60. And it won't. We know that it won't. And even if it does 4K 60, that's ridiculous that the Xbox One goes from 720p, pretty much just dives up to 4K 60 out of absolutely nowhere. It's not going to happen. Microsoft have completely shit all over PC gamers as it is. We've seen them do it time and time and time and time and time again. They did it with the original Xbox. They wanted to fight against Sony. They wanted to fight against Nintendo. So they ditched PC gaming at a time when PC gaming was really in the golden age. It was just amazing. You know, we didn't have day one patches. We didn't have games that were broken and then delayed for 6 months so they can fix them. We didn't have games like No Man's Sky that were just complete lies. You know, Microsoft had their chance and they decided that they wanted to compete in the console market. So they dived in with the Xbox, and X is for DirectX. So it was pretty much a direct Xbox. And they wanted to compete with Sony. Sony at the time had their PlayStation 2 consoles, which were mega popular, great consoles because you bought them just to play games. That's all you bought them for. That's why I loved consoles back then. I could buy a console just for gaming, put my game in, and it never had a problem. There were no massive updates for games. There were no day one updates. There were no patches and errors and all these problems that we have now. Like, the games are more riddled with problems and bugs than they have ever been pretty much in the history of gaming. I actually think that would actually be a good statement. There's never been a time where PC games have had more problems than they have now. PC games used to be much more stable. They used to just work. And then consoles came out or not came out, but there was a big change in the market from pretty much Xbox 360, PS3 era, when game developers were like, well, wow, like, you know, there's a huge install base now. There's tens of millions of console gamers. Let's just shift everything to building games for consoles, and that would have been good if the Xbox One and PS4 were huge leaps over the Xbox 360 and PS3, and they weren't. They were tiny upgrades. And then Sony doesn't even seem to address this with PS4 Pro. The upgrade between PS4 and PS4 Pro is a bigger upgrade than between PS3 and PS4, and Sony aren't even talking about that because they don't want to admit that the PS4 was underpowered. It was underpowered. It should have done 1080p 60 FPS gaming minimum, and the new PS4 Pro or PS5 or whatever they would have called it if the PS4 was originally better, could have done 4K 60 or 4K 30. And it's not going to. It's going to be some games are going to run in native 4K, which is going to be good. We're going to go from games running in native 900p or 1080p right up to 4K. That's a huge undertaking for the CPU and GPU inside of the PS4 Pro to do. It's not easy, and I don't know why Sony aren't again addressing that. So I wrote an article yesterday. It was an interview with The Guardian, and it was with Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Andrew House. So after the PlayStation meeting, which is where the PS4 Pro was unveiled, Andrew said, "I saw some data that really influenced me. It suggested that there's a dip mid-console lifecycle where the players who want the very best graphical experience will start to migrate to PC because that's obviously where it's to be had." So if you look at that, they know that the dip between the mid-cycle is roughly 3 or 4 years. So they know at that time gamers will want to go to the PC because they're starting to see companies like AMD, as much as everyone can bag AMD, they don't compete with NVIDIA in the high-end with the GTX 1080 or Titan X, but AMD have released new cards like the RX 470 and RX 480, which have a new architecture, which have all new features like HDMI 2.0, better VR capabilities, lower power consumption, they're just more efficient. They're just much more efficient for less than $250. So you can buy a whole PC now where you can spend, say, $600, $700 now, and you can be gaming at 1080p 60 without a problem. 1440p 60, mostly without a problem. Maybe you might have to adjust a few details down to medium or high, but your games are going to look way better than what the consoles will for just a little bit more. So sure, you're only spending $399 on a PlayStation 4, but then you need to buy maybe another controller or a stand. You need to, if you're buying Xbox, you need to have Xbox Live Gold, so it starts to cost money. I don't pay for Steam. I don't pay for Origin. I don't pay for any of that stuff. It's a free service because they know that that's what PC gamers want. Like if Steam came out tomorrow, Valve came out tomorrow and said, okay guys, we're going to be charging $20 a month for Steam, that would lose millions and millions and millions of customers. That would lose so many people that they wouldn't even be able to handle it, which is why they would never do that. If they did, it'd have to be a very good reason. So with Andrew House's comment, he continued, and he said, we wanted to keep these people within our ecosystem by giving them the very best and the very highest performance quality, which I pretty much just spat my drink out when I read that laughing. So the net result of these thoughts was PlayStation 4 Pro, and by and large, a graphical approach to game improvement. What is a graphical approach to game improvement? Why? So you're saying that games need to be improved and graphics are a large part of that. And if Sony does mean it like that, which it seems to me they do, then what the hell? That means that they knew that the PlayStation 4 was a huge letdown in terms of how much power it was supposed to have and how much developers are probably smashing them going, our games don't look as good as what they should because the PlayStation 4 should have been more powerful. It's just disgusting. So I went into this huge rant and I just went off. I don't understand that the gaming press these days, they just take this laying down. They don't say anything. If I was writing for a gaming site, I wouldn't be allowed to say what I want to say because I'd be fired in 2 seconds. I can't keep my mouth shut about that kind of stuff. The PlayStation 4 Pro is just not that good. It really isn't. If Sony had changed things, they could have said, look, PlayStation 4 is a good console. We're going to do a big leap. We're gonna dive right into PC gaming. There's nothing stopping Sony from going, from now on, every single one of our first-party games, like Uncharted or Gran Turismo or something like that, they can go, all of these games are on PC. Day one. Just like Microsoft are trying to do and failing with the Windows Store, Sony could go, okay, well, we'll just put our games on Steam, work directly with Valve. Don't try and do your own Sony online network or anything like that where you're trying to push your own digital distribution network on PC. Just totally accept, admit that you are wrong. Admit that you're wrong and then you would gain millions of customers. If Sony came out tomorrow, and I read in my article, if Sony came out tomorrow and said, you know, here's a brand new console, it can do 4K 60, proper 4K 60, with a leap in graphics. So I'm not talking about today's games in 4K 60, I'm talking about tomorrow's games in 4K 60, because there's a gigantic difference between running today's quality graphics in 4K and tomorrow's graphics in 4K. There's a huge difference in what you're actually going to need in terms of raw horsepower. And I don't see how AMD are able to provide a mid-range graphics card like an RX 470-esque graphics card, because it's not a dedicated card. So it's just, you know, similar GPU cores that you find in the Polaris architecture mixed with the 8GB of GDDR5 and then a better tuned, higher clocked CPU. I don't see why Sony couldn't have come out and gone, look, $1,299, and just explain. Everyone would have been like, what? You know, what's going on? $209 for a console? But PC gamers play on $1,299 gaming PCs, and that's not even that expensive. $1,299 for a PC isn't expensive. You know, they can't come out and say, there's not a market for it. There's not a market for $1,299 consoles. People are paying over $1,000 for GTX 1080s. People paying $3,000 or $4,000 for multiple GTX 1080s. And then $2,000 for a CPU, $600 for a motherboard, $500+ for RAM. Then you got to buy a $2,000 or $1,000+ display. You know, a $250 headset, $200 mouse, $250 keyboard. There's so much money you can spend. There's a market there for it. There's hundreds of millions of PC gamers. If Sony came out and said, you know, we're going to release all of our games on PC, we're also going to release a $1,299 console that would have actually maybe have kept up. That would have maybe had changed the game against Microsoft, because all Microsoft is going to do is going to release the Xbox Scorpio at probably, I don't know, $599, and they're going to go, it's faster, and that's it. You're not having Sony come out, like both of them are coming out saying, they're always talking about 4K. It's just 4K. It's not, we want a leap in graphics. We want graphics to go closer towards CG level, which is what they used to say years ago. Does everyone remember Sony teasing the PlayStation 3 and going, oh, we're gonna have, we can do real-time rendering on the cell processor because the cell processor is the next level, and we're gonna be doing, we're gonna be showing off, I think it was Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock. And they were saying that it was being rendered on, you know, PlayStation 3, and 1,000 PlayStation 3s connected can run a nuclear power plant and stuff like that. It's all just BS. Just stop the BS. Stop the PR crap that every company wants to do. Go towards something where you're like, we were wrong. What do we think? What do we think that we should do? Where is PlayStation going to be in 2018, 2019, 2020? You know, are we going to get to the stage where by 2018, a 4K 60 FPS experience can happen on a PC for less than $500 or $600? That is going to happen. It's not going to happen. It is an eventuality. We're going to get to 4K 60 very soon on a mid-range graphics card, because GPU technology upgrades so quickly that even if you buy a card for $1,000 2 years ago, that card is no longer the top dog. Where the PlayStation 4 is the top dog until there's a new PlayStation, and then that one's a top dog, and then the other one's just bad, and then the new one is better, and it just continues. It never goes into a new exciting direction. Why can't we have a, like, if Sony again had released a $1,299 dedicated PlayStation 4 gaming console and said all this thing does is just 4K Blu-ray and gaming? You know, they could make it into a Steam machine-like experience, which is what Valve tried to do and failed. Sony could have really done that. They've got enough of the market to do that. They've got enough tens of millions of gamers that go $12.99. You know, that's pretty expensive. But when you see the graphics and you're like, okay, that makes my PlayStation 4 look like a PS1, because it would. You know, if you're charging 400 or 300% more than the PlayStation 4 Pro, the graphics have to be 2 or 3 times better. If you went from, say, Battlefield, Bad Company 2 level graphics to Battlefield 1, then people are gonna wake up. Console gamers are gonna wake up. They're gonna go, well, wow, maybe I might buy a 4K TV. Maybe I might, you know, hook it up to my PC monitor and enjoy playing it on a mouse and keyboard. But Sony just give you the same console that's a little bit faster and charge you the same money and don't advance the market. They just leave it as it is, and then they'll start wondering why this console sales are going down and then gamers are going over to PC, and it will eventually happen. And now Sony are admitting They're absolutely admitting that their console is completely underpowered. It's completely underpowered. If this is a mid-cycle refresh, that means we are waiting until at least 2020 until there's another PlayStation. Until PlayStation 5 comes out, we're waiting until 2020. That's a long time. Mobile phones are already getting to the point where they have 4K displays. We're gonna have another generation of VR, probably a third generation of VR by 2020. So you're probably looking at 4K per eye for VR by then, which means you're going to need a massive leap in GPU performance. You're going to need to have cards that can do 4K 60 on a single card, and then you're going to need to have cards that can do 4K 120 on a single card, and we're going to have that. It might sound crazy now. I'm running the new Pascal-based Titan X, and I can do 1440p at about 120 frames a second, mix of medium to ultra details depending on the game, but I'm still not at the point where I can just put that in a machine and run 1440p at 144 hertz minimum all the time in every game. I can't do that, but I will eventually. With the PlayStation 4 Pro, there's no eventually. That's it. I've hit the ceiling of performance. Games will never look better because the graphics card that's in there is already underpowered compared to what we have now. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And then Sony to think that they can begin to compare the PlayStation 4 against PC gaming and PC gamers. No. And sure, you don't need to spend, I can see a few comments here, you don't need to spend, $200 on a gaming keyboard or $200 on a mouse or $1,000 on a screen, but you can. That's the option. Not everyone buys a Ferrari, not everyone buys a Tesla, but if you want to, you can. If Sony said, here's a top to bottom list of PlayStations, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 HD, PlayStation 4 Pro, PlayStation 4 Ultra, $12.99, $8.99, $6.99, $4.99. Done. Then make the game for the Ultra and then make it 4K 60. So you're only making one set of assets, you're only making one set of everything, and then have 4 varying levels of detail. Ultra, high, medium, and low. Easy. Ultra is your current PC enthusiast gaming, and then if you have a PC, you'll be able to run those games and they'll look sick because you'll be able to run them faster or higher resolutions in 4K. Then have the high console $899 that just dumps the detail down a little bit, maybe from 4K you're going to 1080p 60 solid with AA. Then you have the $499 console that can do 1080p 60 but with no AA and maybe medium level graphics, which still would look way better than a PlayStation 4. And then a cheaper console where that's the mainstream audience. They're not going to make PlayStation 4 Pro mainstream. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And then even by the time it does, then the market's going to be completely changed. You're going to have Microsoft here with the Xbox Scorpio, which is going to be a faster console. Guaranteed that's probably why they've waited, because Microsoft seemed to be a little bit interested in actually forcing the graphics up. But the games are going to be made on cross-platform. So Microsoft will only probably squeeze all of the performance out of the Xbox Scorpio for first-party games, and then third-party games are just going to be made on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox Scorpio, which means that Xbox Scorpio is going to have better-looking games than Sony. Are Sony going to sit there and take that laying down next year? No, they're not. They can't, or else they're just going to have to admit, our console's underpowered, and now everyone's going to PC. It's going to happen. It makes me so